This is the Balanced Growth Show with Dr. Travis Perry, helping successful business professionals like you achieve balance in their lives.
Welcome to another episode of the Balanced Growth Show. I'm your host, Dr. Travis Perry. Today, I have a special friend and guest on the show, Mr. Adam Hill. Adam is an international keynote speaker, best-selling author, CEO, and host of the top-rated podcast, Flow Over Fear, helping people to embrace fear and realize their ultimate potential in leadership and life. His best-selling book, Shifting Gears from Anxiety and Addiction to a Triathlon World Championship, is available now at Amazon, Audible, and wherever books are sold. Welcome to the show, Adam.
Thanks. It's great to be here, Travis. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. I know we got to meet each other through heroic public speaking, which, you know, I have loved that experience. I've loved being there and meeting just incredible people like you. The caliber has just been amazing of people who've come from all over the country to be there and to meet. So I know that's how we got together. We've talked a little bit in the pre-show, but I want the world to know more about Adam Hill. I want them to understand your story. And you are an open book, like you've mentioned. And I know you've dealt with some, anxiety and alcoholism. Why don't you open up with us and tell us a little bit about how you've been able to get past these things and get to the position that you are now today?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I am an open book. In fact, I better be, because I wrote it all in a book. So I should be. And so I just to kind of set the table a little bit, I grew up with anxiety really before it was cool to, but I grew up with anxiety, but it was more of this underlying kind of just worry at that time. Like, when we didn't talk about it in the 1980s, 1990s, mental health really wasn't on the radar. We were more concerned with like DARE and the DARE program and things like that. Mental health wasn't really on the radar. So, people around me maybe considered me like a worry wart or something like that, but it really showed itself as this condition of anxiety that I was afraid to build relationships. I was afraid to talk to girls in high school, or I was afraid to, I was afraid of the wrath of jocks in that area. But ultimately it led down a pretty dangerous path, even though it was subtle in high school. When I had my first drink in college, I realized very quickly that alcohol took my fears away, took everything away. It made me social, made me the life of the party, and it just made everything great. And I had no history of alcoholism in my family, and like no real significant red flags that would signal that I would be a problem drinker. In fact, when I thought about alcoholism, as many did in those days, I thought of people like sleeping behind dumpsters, or people who had really just different people with different lives, not me, not well put together kids. But over time, and this was like such an insidious and gradual process, alcohol just became a problem for me. They say it's first it's fun, and it really was. Then it's fun with problems, and then it's problems. And that was certainly my trajectory over the course of a few years while I was in college. So that as my drinking got worse, so too did my anxiety that I was trying to suppress through drinking. The anxiety started to manifest as panic attacks, like this incredible panic and despair that I would have on an almost daily basis, that over time I would just, that was my life, this vicious cycle of crippling fear to get through most days and drinking myself into oblivion by night. And, that all came to a head in my early 30s. So I had more than a decade of drinking heavily, drinking alcoholically. And in that time, I tried to maintain a semblance of control over my life by creating rules for myself to prove that I could control it and be able to keep it going, which was like, don't drink before 5 p.m. Don't drink on weeknights. Don't drink hard alcohol. Stick to wine or beer, whatever. And I would break those rules like regularly, just on the regular. But I was able to stick to one sacred cow, like one rule that I would not break. And that was don't drink and drive. and I didn't drink and drive for more than a decade. It was just this rule that I would not break. I hated people who drank and drove, and I did not want to be one of those people. But as progressive as that disease is, even that rule I did break after a while. And I ended up in a DUI accident in a jail cell, and where as I sat in that jail cell, I really began to, think about my relationship with God, my higher power, and what I didn't have control over. And, it was obviously at that point, it was the most despairing, most terrifying part of my life. Fortunately, nobody was hurt in the accident, which was, a blessing, but it's still, it was just this terrifying feeling of like, I don't have no control over my life. So do I end it or do I get help? And fortunately, I leaned into help and I got sober. And that led me into one of my first transformations, this first transformation that I had with fear. And I believe that there's really an evolution that we have with fear or anxiety and I experienced fear as like tremendous anxiety in my life, but I believe that we have this evolution with fear that we experience where we go from fighting it, which I was while I was drinking. I was trying to suppress it, push it down, try and make it go away. And then you rise up to face it, which is where healing happens. And that's what happened with me in sobriety. I finally accepted it as part of my life, started coming to terms, started trying to understand it, named the fears that I had. I went through an exercise where I actually put down on paper all of the fears that I had in my life. And I did that with my AA sponsor. And I just found that incredibly healing because it was just naming my fears. And when you name something like that, you take the power from it. And so that healing process was that first step in facing fear. And that was a pivotal moment for me because it proved to me in my life that there was more that I could achieve, more that I could do that I thought was impossible. I never thought that I could get sober. And this was something that I did. So what else was possible for me? And that would prompt the next transformation that I would have, which led me into Ironman Triathlon and how I ultimately embraced fear and changed my relationship. I'll pause there and kind of see if we maybe touch on any of that or if you want me to continue.
Yeah, you were saying change your relationship. Was that change your relationship with other people or with God? Sorry, I missed that. Why don't you say that last part?
Yeah, so it was changing my relationship with fear. And ultimately that was my relationship with God because my relationship with fear was constantly trying to suppress it. Yeah. And that first evolution was to take it to a level where I had to look at it in the eye and say, this is part of who I am. This is real. This is part of my existence. Yeah. So how do I live with it? How do I embrace it? Or how do I face it? And that certainly did involve God, my higher power, which was a relationship that I had always known was there in my life, but I'd always neglected because I was trying to fight something that was a very human emotion, and I was numbing myself with alcohol. Yeah. And I was fighting against those fears.
Adam, our stories are very similar in a lot of ways. My study of stress and anxiety and addiction have always ended up leading in the same direction that you found. God, our most important priorities in life, and getting past fear. Like we have a lot in common when it comes to, these stories. You and I have dealt with it in different ways. I talk a lot about workaholism as an addiction because it very much is. And I think a lot of people can, they're afraid, so they work more. They're anxious, they work more. And if they want to control something, they work more and it becomes an addiction. So, I'm out on a path to help other dads, business owners who or, CEOs, C-suite execs who are trying to really get a hold of what they're dealing with, which is essentially their stress. So I can see in your story how, your fears become stress, right? They become anxiety. And this was your coping mechanism.
Yes.
This is how you were coping with yourself, your desires, your fears, etc. When you went through and got sober, tell us, like, how important was that connection with God? Because you mentioned, yeah, this is important, but how important was that connection in helping you stay sober?
Yeah, it was incredibly important. It was the most important thing. I mean, in the 12 steps, I mean, that's the first thing we acknowledge is we're powerless. So one of the things, and you're totally right about that ism thing, the alcoholism and workaholism being similar, because really it's all about the ism. It doesn't matter what the vehicle is to suppress whatever you're avoiding. It's about that ism, which is all in here, and it's all in our desire to control things, and that's all part of those first couple steps of the 12-step program. Really is admitting that powerless, that unmanageability. When you do that, you have to acknowledge that regardless of what you think, regardless of what your ism is, that you already have a higher power. For me, it was alcohol. I had no control over it, so I had a god. It was alcohol. But and if it's work, it's work. If it's sex, it's sex. It's any of those isms. To get away from that, you have to find another higher power that you can essentially lean on and trust on and let go of all of those things too, and recognize that. And for me, it was God. It was, it was God was my higher power, and I found him in that jail cell, and he was always with me. But again, I was avoiding him. But in that jail cell, in that moment of deep despair, and where I was at my worst, where I was low on faith, where I was low on where I was high on fear, God was there with me, and I felt the presence. And then throughout the process of healing, I was able to let go because I knew God was with me, and I just trusted God through that process. It wasn't easy. I mean, I was still facing tremendous legal repercussions, things I never thought that I would face, and repercussions from family, repercussions from society, and all of that. But that constant in my life was God. Yeah. It wasn't his fault that I was an alcoholic. It wasn't his fault that I was going through that, but he was with me, trying to walk through me and heal and help me heal. There is so much power in recognizing that.
Man, I'm feeling it. I really appreciate this. Because like I said, I've studied psychology, studied human development. But as I looked at stress and where a lot of, especially us men, are putting it, a lot of times it is back into our work. And for me, when the work doesn't fix it, there were other coping mechanisms that were kind of related. Mm-hmm. And that's when I found the 12 steps. And I've been through the 12 steps several times. And, I've even helped family members go through the steps. And while I don't use that as my go-to coaching or anything like that, because I find very few are actually legitimate workaholics, but they have workaholic tendencies. And when those don't work, they go to alcohol, they go to pornography, they go to food, they go to other things to kind of fix it when it's not working. So I think these are all kind of related, like any addiction. It seems like it brings in other addictions with it, right? Two or other three things like, hey, I want to keep you addicted. And I'm not saying like there's some evil big brother wanting to do all this. We could break that down another time, but I want to focus on the positive side. And that is, you found sport, you found triathlons, you became an Ironman. Tell us about how that has also helped you in, reaching your full potential. Because obviously we know God's important in your life. And one other quick thing before we go there, when I speak on stage, I actually ask people to stand up. Tell me when their most important priority shows up on the screen. And 9 times out of 10, most people stand up when it comes to their spiritual health, their relationship with God. Yeah. Whether they're living it or not doesn't matter, but they know inside that is core for them. Right. So let's kind of transition to, how did you get into Ironman? Was it a God thing? Was it something that you felt like, no, I need to direct myself into a different direction and use my energy there? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, I think it was a very spiritual thing, because there's these desires that we have, and I talk a lot about this on when in some of my content and on stage, where there's these desires that we have that are kind of superficial. Like, I spent my entire 20s wanting 6-pack abs, but how does that really serve the world? Can we really look back on our life and look back, man, I'm glad I have those 6-pack abs, or glad I bought that Maserati, or whatever it was. The superficial like kind of things, those desires, while they may, be great in the moment, don't really serve us. But there's also that spiritual kind of calling. And I think that happens a lot of times in our life where we just feel that soul calling, those moments where we have that moment where fear and excitement rise up in us. And I think of that as our brains and our hearts saying like eureka and nope at the same time. And sometimes your brain screams louder than your heart, and you talk yourself out of those spiritual pulls. But sometimes, if you have the right mindset, your heart can scream louder than your brain, and you start to pursue it with conviction. And for me, I thought of the Ironman triathlon before I started pursuing the Ironman. I thought of it twice in my life. And the first time was when I was still in my alcoholism, when I was still drinking. It was probably around 2006 when I saw the Ironman Triathlon on television for the first time. And I remember watching television on the couch on a Saturday afternoon and seeing these amazing athletes, like when the announcer came on and just like started saying the distances: 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike, 26.2 mile run. I remember thinking to myself, like, who does that? That's insane. In one day? Are you crazy? What kind of monsters do this? And then I start seeing the people that are crossing the finish line, the inspirational stories. People like John Blaze, who had ALS when he was doing the race. People like Rick and Dick Hoyt, the father and son team, who the father was pushing his son with cerebral palsy across the finish line. I was watching that, and I was just thinking to myself, that's amazing. Look at these. I mean, how does that happen? And just like the wheels started turning, and then the question hit: what if I could do something like that? And in that moment, like this dream was like just born, and like this excitement rose up in me, and then the fear rose up. And it like, so that moment of like fear and excitement rising up at that moment, that's the signal really that you're onto something. But at that moment where my mindset was, where I was in this limiting frame of mind, in my alcoholism, in my anxiety, my brain immediately shut it down and said, no, you're not an athlete. Are you kidding me? You're not an Ironman. You can't do that. You smoke a pack of cigarettes a day. You drink. Why don't you go back to drink and feel sorry for yourself? And so that was, so the dream died like within milliseconds of it being born. But years later, when I had a year of sobriety, and that year was really important because for that first year of sobriety, I constantly heard from the long timers, the long time sober people in AA, don't make any major life changes in your first year in sobriety. And my brain translated that into, well, I guess at 1 year of sobriety, I need to make a major life change. That's just the way it goes.
Too funny.
Yeah. So I was already like, I was already tired of being unhealthy. I mean, I was tired of, I had gotten sober, and I was in this space of like, I want to be healthy, and I want to stop smoking. I want to stop eating like all the junk food that I'm eating. So how do I do that? And then the conditions of that, like desire to make a major life change, laying in bed, like recovering or, with a year of sobriety, and just this, and wanting to be healthy, like made the conditions right for the Ironman Triathlon to re-enter my mind. And at that moment, I thought about the same things I had before, and the same feelings hit. That fear and excitement rose up in me. But this time I had that like powerful spiritual connection and that powerful conviction of like, I can do more than I thought I could do. And so I said, well, why not? And within the week, I looked online and tried to find out how to sign up for the Ironman World Championship, which I really learned very quickly that you can't just sign up for, you have to qualify for. And it's like the top 1% of Ironman triathletes in the world. And so that wasn't an option for me yet.
Right.
But then I looked at the next best option, which was just sign up for an Ironman. And so I did, without knowing how to ride a road bike, without ever swimming more than 25 yards in a pool. I just signed up for an Ironman a year late that was going to happen in about a year later. And yeah, I just started building the parachute on the way down.
Dude, as somebody who's done triathlons, I did the other way around. I was inspired by these athletes and like, they're fantastic. I'm going to start at the smallest, lake possible. I started doing some sprint triathlons and I realized pretty fast, this is not my sport. I
Mhm.
love biking on a mountain with dirt, rocks, trees, things that, I could crash into in case something happened. But I have like ultimate respect for you, and I've got a brother-in-law who does a bunch of Ironmans, and it's crazy because those distances, like a lot of researchers will say, it's not great for the body,
Mhm.
but people say, yeah, but it's great for the mind. Like, you know what? I can't disagree. I
Right.
can't disagree because you're pushing through pain. You're pushing past fear. You're pushing past all of these issues in life. And I can kind of see this. I don't know if anybody said or if you've thought about this before, but do you see Ironman and racing triathlons? Do you see that as like constantly pushing back the demons in your life, that you're moving forward through these races, telling yourself over and over again, no, this is who I am now? Do you see this as like a new birth for you?
Yes, absolutely. And it was one of those things that did require to find a level of balance in my life, certainly, because you can go over the top with Ironman and really devote, just tremendous amounts of time and sacrifice your family and do all that. It turns into another addiction.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did. I mean, like when you have to go on a bike ride for 5 hours, that's a lot of time just spending in your head. And that was time like in my younger life where I was trying to fight it. That was time. That was an area where I didn't want to go. I didn't want to go in there. But that time, that quiet time, those quiet miles on the road, spent a lot of time up here. And that actually led to continuous healing. I mean,
Mhm.
just that idea, it forced me into this slow meditation of, really building on that connection I had with, my spiritual connection, with my mental connection. It helped me to grow. It helped me to prove what was possible for myself. And that's what I really loved about the Ironman and was the fact that it's a distance that seems in our minds to be impossible. Like 112 miles on a bike. I don't even want to drive that far. I
Right.
mean, that's like between here. That's between like, San Diego and Los Angeles. How do you do that?
Yeah.
But really, like it is possible for human beings, and
Yeah.
evolutionarily speaking, that's what we're built for, and
Yeah.
we can do those distances. So and demonstrating to ourselves what we can achieve translates into all of the other areas of our life, and ultimately even doing those things, even throwing those things into our life, I believe, at least for me, it created the energy, it created the capacity for me to have a more abundant life, to fit more in,
Yeah.
because I wasn't just constantly thinking like of resentment of what I wasn't doing. I was doing something.
I love this, and I know we're getting to balance, and I know people are thinking about, oh, this is the Balanced Growth Show. You've spoken it, one time. Well, yeah, because your story hits home. I want to go deep here, and I'm glad you brought up balance because I've heard this. A lot of people who leave one addiction, sometimes they just find another addiction because they have addictive personalities, and yeah, well, it can be true, but you can also learn to break that cycle. And it sounds like this healthy outlet of working out and being in the saddle, on the run and in the water, uh, which by themselves, a marathon, a century ride, the distance in the pool or in the out in the open water, typically for these triathlons, in and of themselves are a race. In and of
Yeah.
themselves is the challenge that most people will never do in their lifetime. But
Mm-hmm.
you put all three together, and that's where the mind just blows. In fact, I had one of my best clients, Ryan, who I've been coaching with for several years now, and he's like, I've always wanted to run a half Ironman when I was 50,
Mm-hmm.
and so I helped work with him on this. But he's like, it's a good thing that you're the balance man. You can help me with balance because I would totally be out of balance training for the half Ironman that he's doing. He's like, when do you find 3 hours to go on a ride? Like you said. So very much balance is important. So let's talk about this. You're a business leader. You're the CEO of a family owned company that's been in the family for how long? Several generations, right?
100 years. So we just
100
celebrated our
years.
100th birthday. Yeah. So 4 generations.
Oof.
Yeah.
Okay, man. So this is big. Because I came from a family business, the third generation that just, it never got to me. And, I made some choices here, but you've stuck with it.
Mhm.
And you're leading this company and you have a family, right? You're married, you have children.
Yes.
Talk to us. Why is balance even important to you then as a leader?
Yeah, I mean, it's hugely important because especially, I mean, there's a lot of things that being in a family business has shown. I mean, we have our immediate family and my life when I finished kind of my Ironman journey, that's when I started in this role of CEO, and it started a new endurance journey. And I realized, I mean, even for the first few years, and I'm still learning this now, I was out of balance because I felt a lot of that weight on my shoulders. I felt a lot of the weight of a century of business on my shoulders, a century of legacy and family on my shoulders that was there, plus the family that I have, with my wife and my 2 kids, making sure that I have the time with them and a daughter that's been having some mental health challenges of her own. So that's been a struggle and a constant battle. So finding that balance it's a daily practice. And it's almost like, with regard to how that works is one of the great things that I found within the business to do that, to make sure that you're finding that balance is to incorporate the systems. We didn't have a lot of great systems that were in place for a while, for those 100 years. It was just, it was an old school kind of legacy company that just, survived on the relationships and the founder's vision and all those kinds of things. But we didn't have a lot of the systems in place. And so it took a lot of work to get those systems in place. And we started using EOS, the entrepreneurial operating system, about 2.5 years ago. And that was a game changer because it put the systems in place to kind of take a lot of the decision fatigue or the decision weight off of my shoulders, and not the decisions themselves, but the weight of those decisions off my shoulders, and put them onto more of a system. And it helped us to really put the right people in the right seats to make sure that we can build that time into our own lives. Again, it's a struggle we continue to have because and I'm sure, you're well into this, that within our society, we're in the society of just like, working hard, of pushing to the limit, of like giving 110% is the standard that people want to live up to, or that people maybe even expect. But I found that to be really dangerous. And I'm trying to kind of eliminate that in our company, that attitude in our company, so that we prioritize the time we spend with our family, the time that we spend outside of the company, and that we're doing what we're doing here in the business for the benefit of our own family, what we really want to do.
You mentioned some things here that are so key, and I appreciate you bringing them up. And that is to have system.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people, they ask me all the time, like, "Hey, can you give me your best tip? Can you give me your best time management hack or balance thing?" And like, no. The best thing I can tell you is have a system.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's the hack that I give you, if that's the tip, it's one that people, yeah, that's nice, that's great. Oh no, I'm not going to do it, right? But you're living proof that having a system that helps you to stay productive and focused at work allows you to then reinvest time into your personal life. That truly is the make time method that I wrote about in Achieving Balance, that you reinvest into your personal life, like you mentioned. But I also find that, Adam, that's the key to keeping balance, is the more that you invest into your personal life, the less that you're going to be out of balance because of work becoming an addiction and becoming this ever-present, go-to God that I'll just solve it by working more is not going to be the answer. I solve it by going on my mountain bike. I'm like, honey, I know I went on one this morning. No, just kidding. I don't think I've ever done that, but I come home like, I'm wasted. I need to go on a ride. She's like, get out of here.
Yeah.
Because she knows I come back home, I'm a different Travis. I'm a much better Travis. when I'm able to ride and pedal and, bomb down a hill and get all of the emotions that are, built up there out into sport, into exercise, man, has that been an absolute game changer for me. And now we're finding studies all over the place. One actually came out from the UK saying the number one thing that doctors should be prescribing for anxiety, depression, mental health conditions is exercise, is getting out. So I can see how this is, really related to what you're doing. And I love that as a business leader, someone who's got all this weight on your shoulders with family and business, that you're being this example. So as the leader, how have you been growing the business while trying to keep the balance?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the good thing of having a company that's been around for a very long time is you have a great baseline, a great foundation of values. And a lot of times, my theory is that there are, core values which are great to have. You want those 3 to 5 really clear core values that everybody lives by, that you measure, that you hire, reward, and fire by, right? But a lot of times we also add in over time, over years and years and years, we add in sacred cows, which are kind of the opposite end of that, which are these things that are like the non-negotiables that are really the confrontations that we just want to avoid, or we don't want to disrupt because we think it'll disrupt the artificial harmony or whatever exists there. And so those things build up over time if we don't address them. And they cause more stress on the leader. It makes the leader a pressure vessel to all of that stress they're trying to manage with those sacred cows. I mean, those sacred cows could be something like, well, we don't want to disrupt these particular types of people within the organization because they are untouchable or what have you. But if we don't address those, it becomes a pressure vessel for the leader. But I think that just addressing them, being like injecting some honesty into the company and bringing those issues to light and discussing them openly and honestly with compassion and care, with like bringing love to everything. It's just like what God wants us to do is just bring love to everything we do. Then we can at least name those things. And again, naming things brings the power away from them. And then we can start to move beyond them. And the more of those sacred cows you can remove, the more that opens up to additional growth, opening our mind, or opening our ideas to what we can become. Again, if you can stay consistent with your core values and, start to chip the rust off of those sacred cows, you can start to grow. And that's really what we've been doing over the last few years.
Love it. This is a lot about culture is what I'm hearing. I'm a lot about, trying to arrange the culture so that it is based on your core values and belief systems. So how is that culture allowed for this cultivating of balance inside the business? What does that look like? You have over 100 employees. I don't know all the details of their virtual, in person, where they're located, but let's talk to me about how that has been addressed. Yeah.
So like many companies, COVID gave us the opportunity to send people home. And I say opportunity, but it kind of forced a lot of that on us, to send some administrative staff home. And while we have a lot of manufacturing staff, of course, and drivers and things like that have to be present somewhere, what that did was at least it injected a bit of flexibility into our organization. So we allowed people to go home, and after all of that was over, we allowed people to stay there or come into an office, whatever they prefer, because a lot of people have the style that they like to work in is specific to them. They may like to go into an office, or they may like to stay home, or they may like to work virtually. And so we have that flexibility, which allows people to to be in the environment that they want, which I think incorporates balance. Now, it is a bit of a double-edged sword, because I found just by my own self that working at home, working virtually, opens up the door to more workaholism. Like I could find myself working until 8 p.m. because I just can't shut it off. So what we try to do is we just try to encourage the types of behaviors within our organization, led from the top, to avoid that promoting of that additional work. So I won't send an email to anybody, or I'll schedule an email to make sure it sends inside of work hours. I'm not sending anything outside of work hours. I'm deliberately setting rules for myself to shut down anything, any work related stuff by 6:30, by dinner time, and nothing after that. And that is something I'm encouraging for everybody to do within our organization. So incorporating that type of balance is important. But again, it's a long process, because these behaviors are kind of built in. And so changing that perspective, you can't just tell someone, hey, we no longer expect 110%, we expect 80%. People are kind of maybe a little bit wary about that until the behaviors actually kind of demonstrate themselves that we're walking the talk.
You nailed it. I really do believe that's exactly the thing that the culture needs. They need balanced leaders like you who can say, we're making changes. I'm going to be the leader. I'm going to step up. I'm going to do it. I'm not going to email you at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
And if I did, it was my fault, or it was a mistake. But I mean, this is what I hear all the time is from leaders who struggle with, everybody has a different way of doing their work, and they have a different way of managing their time. I've found that a lot of businesses don't have a congruent system for time management. They kind of leave it up to employees to figure it out. And I think that it's good and bad. But I've seen a lot of times more on the bad side, because now we've got people who, hey, I want you to respond at 2 a.m. And no, I don't do that. And some that are really staunch, and it creates some issues. Well, you're in sales and I'm in operations, and all of a sudden there's these culture wars.
Yeah.
That's not how we do it in this department,
Right.
and you have a physical product, like your Hill Brothers Chemical. You have a physical product, you have drivers, you have different, operational concerns than other businesses that provide maybe a service as a product. So I can definitely see some challenges. What are some other challenges that you've identified as like trying to lead your firm with this balance and try to help your team to have this cultivated into the culture?
Yeah, I think the biggest ones are definitely culture related, because you have to really fight to maintain a culture. And when you're trying to make changes within an organization, which are always important, change and adaptation is always something that's going to happen. Maintaining the culture, or maintaining the good parts of the culture while disrupting the sacred cows, is a difficult balance. I think that one of the things that becomes really important to maintaining that balance and walking the talk as a leader is also setting boundaries. Is being willing to say no when somebody asks of your time when it's not an appropriate time, and setting those boundaries appropriately, and making sure that people know, hey, I am taking a vacation, or hey, I am spending time with the family, or hey, this is dedicated to this time is dedicated to that. Those boundaries, I think, demonstrate to everybody that we're willing to make those changes. And that, as it relates to fear, which is really the topic that I talk about, that's a hard thing to do, because as leaders, when we see our people trying to give everything that they have and not wanting them to, it's hard to disrupt that by setting an example, by having a balanced life, because it almost looks entitled. But what we're really trying to do is just demonstrate to everybody that this is the ideal that we want for everybody within the organization. If there's something disrupting that, again, let's make a conversation. Let's set an issue about it. Let's solve it, because we shouldn't have anybody in our organization that is living an unbalanced life. We are all, if we have employees, we are human resources companies. We are people companies. We have human beings that work for us, and they have lives, they have desires, they have dreams, and we should be doing our best to give them the space to do whatever they may to do that, while reaping the benefits of their value, and bringing that value to our organizations.
Appreciate that. Yeah, I can totally get that. This is a challenge. It's a culture challenge.
Mm-hmm.
I think COVID really brought this to the forefront. like, hey, it's screaming at us like, oh yeah, this has been a problem if it has in your company for a while, or I'm just saying anyone's company out there.
Yeah.
That's really, we've been talking about this more because I see a direct correlation with those who have great balance and solid mental health. Like that, those are related, I've seen that in the work that we've done. And then I've also seen that those who have great balance culture in their firm, they're so much more productive. They get so much more done in the time that they're actually at work. Are there exceptions where you have to work an all-nighter or there's an emergency on a weekend or something? I grew up, my family was in the plumbing business. It's a service-based business.
Right.
Sometimes people are going to call you on Sunday. My house is flooded. You can't say, "Oh, sorry, it's my personal boundary." And no, they had a system. Their system was you were on call that weekend, and if you were on call, you had to go change and help that customer out. So I mean, there's different ways to do this. But what I really heard you say is that sometimes by being the leader, it looks like you're entitled. And I had a gentleman who we were interviewing one time. We were talking about being the leader. He's like, wow, I think that's sending the wrong message to the business. I was like, wait, what? Why? He's like, well, because, you're taking all this vacation. I'm like, oh, and if you're not allowing your employees to do the same, I could see how that could rub them wrong. So what are you going to do about it? And so I like that this is part of your culture. This is part of what you want to see at Hill Brothers. I love the story, and I know we went deep here. I know people can get more about your story with your book, Shifting Gears. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that before we wrap here, Adam? How can they get that book from you?
Yeah, absolutely. I got it here. It's Shifting Gears. They can find it on Amazon. And if you do look it up, just look up Shifting Gears and Adam Hill, because there's a lot of different titles by that name that you may want to avoid. But they can also find it on Audible if they want to hear my voice talking to you and sharing the story of my life with you. That's they could also find it there.
Awesome. That's what I'm doing as soon as we're done with this today. I didn't know there was the Audible version. I love that. That's how I consume books. And I even sent out an announcement about my book coming out. And the first thing this morning, I had an email returned. What is it on Audible? I'm like, oh, I do the same. I like to listen, and I like to hear the author's voice. I want to connect with them.
Yeah.
And if I really love it, then I'll buy it and consume it and rip it up apart. And so so great for you to be on the show, telling your story, inspiring others out there who are leading companies, leading their company as the balanced leader, and being able to shift the culture at work so that everyone can enjoy that balance. What a great example you are. Thank you for being on the show. I appreciate your time and making time to be here today, Adam.
Thank you, Travis. This was an honor. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. If people do want to connect with you, I'll put some, resources, your website and things in the show notes. But definitely, guys, take advantage. Get the book, Shifting Gears. Reach out to Adam, connect with him on LinkedIn. Very, very active on LinkedIn and sharing his message there. And if you enjoy this as much as I have, share, like, subscribe, do all the things. And remember, till next time, live life on purpose.